The Zimbabwean air was heavy with dust when the Tesla engineers first touched the ground, but their minds were heavier still, filled with doubt and anticipation about what they were about to see. They had traveled under the radar, no press releases, no official sanction from their company, just a discreet mission to satisfy their own curiosity about an inventor who had dared to defy the foundations of energy science. Maxwell Chikumbutso was waiting for them with calm eyes and the quiet demeanor of a man who had carried secrets for too long. His compound was not some futuristic lab with polished steel and glass, but a modest workshop filled with tools, parts, and the unmistakable aura of someone who had built things with his own hands. There, sitting silently like a predator ready to pounce, was the car that carried so many rumors, the self-powered electric vehicle that supposedly ran forever on radio frequency energy. The Tesla engineers approached it with skepticism, expecting trickery, hidden cables, or theatrical illusions meant to dazzle outsiders. But Maxwell offered them full access without hesitation, encouraging them to inspect every detail and test it themselves. They pried open the panels, crawled under the chassis, examined the motor connections, and searched for the familiar lithium-ion battery pack that every electric vehicle depended on. What they found instead was a unique array of components that resembled nothing they had ever seen, a strange assembly Maxwell referred to as his radio frequency power unit. It wasn't a battery in the traditional sense, but a converter, he explained, designed to capture ambient energy and continuously feed the motor. To their disbelief, there was no charging port, no gasoline backup, no solar panels hiding on the roof. The car, in every sense, appeared to be entirely independent. Maxwell gestured for them to take it for a drive, and with hesitant hands, they did. The motor hummed to life with an eerie silence, smoother than they expected, and the car accelerated down the dirt path leading away from the compound. They drove for hours through streets buzzing with motorcycles and old combustion cars, then out into open stretches where they could push the machine harder. At every turn, the car performed flawlessly, never hesitating, never slowing, and never once signaling a need for recharge. One engineer whispered under his breath that if this was real, it was the end of everything they knew. The words lingered in the cabin like a ghost, unshakable, undeniable. By the time they returned the car, the engineers were silent, their skepticism melted into confusion and awe. They knew physics said this was impossible, that perpetual motion was a myth, yet their senses betrayed their training. Maxwell, watching them, offered no triumphant speech, no gloating. It was as if he had shown them the obvious truth, and their struggle to accept it was not his burden to carry. In that moment, the engineers realized that the problem was not the car but themselves. They had built their entire careers on incremental improvements, better batteries, faster charging, more efficient motors, while here was a man who had jumped over the entire paradigm. The Tesla team left Zimbabwe shaken, carrying a secret too heavy to share, knowing that to speak of it publicly would risk ridicule or worse. Back in California, their lives returned to normal, but their thoughts did not. Late at night, some replayed the sound of the motor, the sensation of endless acceleration without a battery drain. Others wrote down their experiences in private journals, afraid even to confide in colleagues. One engineer confided to a friend that it felt like touching the future and being forced to pretend it was a dream. The secrecy was necessary, but secrecy breeds rumors, and soon fragments of their journey began leaking into online forums and whispered conversations. Enthusiasts claimed Tesla employees had confirmed Maxwell's invention, though none dared cite names or specifics. Skeptics dismissed it as nonsense, insisting that the laws of physics could not be overturned by a backyard inventor. But supporters argued that every great disruption in history had started with a single mind working outside the mainstream. The debates raged, some branding Maxwell the African Nikola Tesla, others branding him a con artist. Through it all, Maxwell remained quiet, continuing his work in Harare, seemingly unconcerned with the storm his invention had created abroad. Yet the storm was real, and its reach extended even into the corridors of power in the United States. Whispers surfaced that a wealthy American businessman had secretly purchased one of Maxwell's cars and shipped it overseas. This man, whose name was never confirmed, allegedly wanted to test the vehicle on private roads, away from the eyes of oil lobbyists, regulators, or the press. The very existence of this rumor sent shockwaves through the industry, because if true, it meant the car had crossed borders and entered the heart of global capitalism. Speculation swirled about who the buyer might be. Some suggested it was a Silicon Valley tech investor looking to monopolize the technology before it became public. Others suspected it was linked to oil companies buying time by locking the car away in a vault to prevent its release. And still others whispered that Tesla itself might have orchestrated the purchase through a shell company seeking to study Maxwell's secrets in private. No proof ever surfaced, but the mere possibility was enough to ignite countless theories. In the middle of this speculation loomed Elon Musk, the man whose name was synonymous with electric vehicles and technological disruption. What would Elon do if Maxwell's car proved real? Would he denounce it as fake science? Or would he extend a hand of partnership to bring it into Tesla's fold? Elon's public persona was one of bold curiosity. He admired radical thinkers, he spoke openly about harnessing new forms of energy, and he often welcomed competition if it advanced the mission of sustainable technology. But privately, investors and insiders knew that Tesla's entire empire was built around batteries and charging infrastructure. Billions had been invested in gigafactories, supply chains, and supercharging networks. If cars no longer needed batteries or chargers, the foundation of Tesla's business would be shaken. It was both an opportunity and a threat, a knife that could cut two ways. Some insiders speculated that Elon would see Maxwell's work as the natural extension of Tesla's mission to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. Others feared he would fight against it not out of malice, but out of necessity to protect his company and its investors. Meanwhile, the Tesla employees who had visited Zimbabwe kept their silence, their official loyalty binding them, but their personal conscience gnawing at them. They knew what they had seen, and it haunted them. They had touched a car that seemed to break the rules, and they could never unsee it. Every time they walked past a Tesla Model 3 on the production floor, every time they discussed battery ranges and charging times, they thought of Maxwell's car and wondered if they were building yesterday's technology for tomorrow's world. It was not a comfortable thought, but it was the truth. And as they struggled in silence, the legend of Maxwell's self-powered car continued to spread, becoming a story too large to contain. Some said it was hype, others swore it was real, but all agreed on one thing: if the car ever reached the public, the world would never be the same again. The story of Maxwell's car did not end in Zimbabwe, because technology that promises freedom cannot stay hidden forever. When the rumor spread that an American businessman had secretly purchased one of his vehicles, whispers began turning into obsession. In the private corners of Silicon Valley, investors spoke about it in hushed tones, speculating on how they might gain access, while in Washington, analysts quietly warned of the destabilizing effect such a technology could have on global energy markets. The businessman, whose name was carefully kept out of every leak, supposedly housed the car in a secure facility guarded against both theft and spying. Inside, teams of engineers worked day and night to reverse engineer its mysterious power system. The story goes that they drove it repeatedly, recording every second of its operation, pushing it until the tires wore out, but the power never faltered. One leaked note from the facility allegedly read, "The car simply will not die," a chilling confirmation that Maxwell's claims may have been more than showmanship. If these rumors were true, then the self-powered car was no longer just an African legend. It was now being dissected on American soil. This realization sent shivers across multiple industries. The oil companies, already struggling to adapt to electric cars, saw in Maxwell's invention the end of their empire. Charging infrastructure companies who had spent billions laying out networks across highways and cities faced instant obsolescence. Even traditional automakers who were just beginning their transition to EVs realized they might already be too late. What use was a battery EV when a self-powered one existed? At the same time, governments grew nervous because their control over energy taxation was suddenly under threat. Much of the world's revenue streams are tied to fuel and electricity taxes, and a car that bypassed both meant governments would lose billions annually. This was not just engineering breakthrough, it was an economic earthquake. And in the middle of this storm was Tesla, the company that had led the charge into electric vehicles, but now found itself staring into a future that might bypass its entire foundation. Elon Musk was no stranger to disruption, but even he could not ignore the implications of Maxwell's car. If it was real, Elon faced a choice: embrace it or fight it. Embracing it would mean accelerating his mission to free humanity from fossil fuels, but it would also mean dismantling parts of Tesla's empire that investors had poured billions into. Fighting it would mean preserving Tesla's dominance, but at the cost of betraying the very mission Elon had always claimed to champion. What path would he take? Some insiders speculated Elon would reach out to Maxwell directly, seeking a partnership to merge Tesla's manufacturing power with Maxwell's technology. Others believed Elon would take a wait-and-see approach, allowing governments and competitors to tear Maxwell down before stepping in to pick up the pieces. But the Tesla engineers who had driven the car knew that ignoring it was impossible. They had felt the truth in their hands, and they understood that the world was standing at the edge of a revolution. Meanwhile, in Zimbabwe, Maxwell continued his work quietly, as though unaware that his invention was sending ripples through the most powerful boardrooms on Earth. His focus was always the same: liberating people from dependence, giving ordinary Africans a way to live without the crushing weight of energy costs. To him, the car was not about markets or politics, it was about freedom. But freedom for some is danger for others, and powerful forces were already plotting. Reports emerged that agents from oil interests had tried to approach Maxwell with offers of enormous sums of money in exchange for shelving his invention. He refused, just as he had refused before when similar offers were made for his self-powered generators. His refusal only deepened the hostility against. Online, debates grew more vicious, with skeptics doubling down that his invention was a scam, while supporters argued that the hostility itself proved he was on to something. Every week, new alleged leaks surfaced: pictures of the car in an American warehouse, claims from unnamed engineers that the system truly worked, even whispers that the U.S. government itself was quietly monitoring the situation. Some speculated the car might already be in the hands of defense agencies who were more interested in military applications than public transportation. Imagine a tank or drone that never needed refueling. The strategic advantage would be enormous. This possibility terrified those who saw Maxwell's invention as a gift meant for ordinary people. Would it be twisted into a weapon instead of a liberation tool? And if governments classified it, would the public ever see it again? Against this backdrop of secrecy and speculation, the question of Elon Musk's stance became more pressing. For many fans of Tesla, Elon represented the hope of technological freedom, the man willing to risk everything to push humanity forward. If anyone could protect Maxwell's work and bring it into the mainstream, it was him. But Elon was also a businessman, responsible to investors, partners, and governments. Would he be allowed to embrace something so destabilizing? Some theorists even suggested that the silent Tesla engineers had already reported to him and that he was quietly preparing a strategy. Perhaps he was waiting for the right moment to unveil a partnership. Perhaps he was already building a new division inside Tesla to explore self-powered technology. Or perhaps he was deliberately staying silent, wary of exposing his company to a war with oil giants and governments not ready to see their industries collapse. Meanwhile, the car itself remained at the center of the storm. Videos of Maxwell driving it surfaced again, each time fueling debates online, with some calling him the savior of Africa and others branding him a fraud. But those who had driven it, including Tesla's own engineers, knew it was neither fraud nor fantasy. It was real, and it was dangerous precisely because it was real. One engineer later confessed privately that he had nightmares about it. Not nightmares of the car failing, but nightmares of it succeeding, because success meant the end of everything we knew, and human history has never been kind to disruptive truths. The world has always resisted paradigm shifts, from the printing press to electricity to the internet, and this car was bigger than all of them combined. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was the death of fuel, the death of scarcity, the death of control. And for those who profited from scarcity and control, it was unacceptable. Yet no matter how hard they tried to contain it, the whispers kept growing, reaching millions who began to believe that freedom might be possible. In rural Africa, villagers spoke of a future where they could drive without ever paying for gas. In Europe, climate activists saw it as the ultimate solution to pollution. In America, investors saw it as both the biggest opportunity and the biggest threat of their lifetimes. And in secret labs, engineers continued testing it, documenting what they could not deny. The car worked. How it worked was still a mystery, but that it worked was undeniable. And so the question hung over the world like a storm cloud waiting to break. When will it be revealed to the public? Would Maxwell himself unveil it on a global stage, risking suppression? Would a corporation quietly absorb it and release it under its own brand? Or would governments lock it away forever, hidden from the people it could liberate? The Tesla engineers who had seen it believed time was running out. They knew too many eyes were watching now, too many leaks spreading. The secret could not be contained forever, and when it broke, the world would change in an instant. For better or for worse, Maxwell's self-powered car was real, and the reaction of those who had touched it, those Tesla employees whose silence betrayed their awe, was proof enough. Whether Elon Musk embraced it, fought it, or ignored it, the future had already arrived. It was waiting, humming quietly in a Zimbabwean workshop, in an American warehouse, in the imaginations of millions who longed to be free from fuel. And when the moment came, when the truth could no longer be hidden, the world would wake up to a new reality, one in which the impossible had been made possible. And that, more than anything else, was what terrified those in power. Because if a single man in Africa could rewrite the rules of energy, then perhaps the world was not as controlled as they thought. And perhaps the future belonged not to the giants of industry, but to the dreamers, the rebels, and the inventors like Maxwell Chikumbutso, who dared to build a car that never stopped moving.